sentence B. Oh, jeez. This is gonna be crazy, I just know it. And let's go.
If the Bikini Bottom Police Department ever got serious about cracking down on Plankton's endless schemes, they would probably put him behind bars for a few months for littering the town and harassing Mr. Krabs.
Turn to your left.
But what if you actually took the time to tally up every single crime Plankton has ever committed? Well, I spent the last 7 business days doing exactly that. To figure out just how much of his life would be spent rotting away in a bikini bottom cell, I broke down his crimes into categories, starting with minor offenses that might get him a slap on the wrist, if the wrist in question wasn't robotic. Now, I'm 110% sure you would have never thought Mr. Krabs had a secret weakness for chum.
I was starting to feel peckish.
Oh, that is disgusting.
That flavor. Sweet.
Well, Plankton saw an opportunity in the episode The Hankering when he discovered that Mr. Krabs liked chum.
My stomach's making strange noises.
What are you talking about? Oh, fine. I'm hooked on chum, okay?
He thought exploiting his rival's cravings in a diabolical scam would be the perfect idea to steal the secret formula. Posing as an honest chum supplier, Plankton struck a deal with Mr. Krabs. In exchange for the Krabby Patty formula, Krabs would receive a lifetime supply of chum. The deal was sealed, but Plankton never intended to hold up his end of the bargain. The betrayal came quickly. As soon as the formula was in Plankton's possession, he double-crossed Krabs, using the chum bucket glove to attack both Krabs and SpongeBob. Fraudulent schemes like this rely on deception, and in the real world, fraud is no laughing matter. Assuming this was an isolated event, as Plankton usually relies on brute force or spying instead of scams, he would face up to 10 years in prison. And then we have his littering, a crime that might not make headlines in Bikini Bottom, but would still get him hauled into court. Sure, it sounds small, but when your failed contraptions and busted robots are scattered all over Bikini Bottom, it adds up. For example, in the episode Dying for Pie, Imitation Krabs, we see his robot blowing up.
This must be your lucky day.
10 seconds till detonation.
Listen, there's a skip ads for everybody.
I can't believe that ad just perfectly cut the explosion.
I mean, that's not biodegradable. Those busted robots and gadgets are just sitting there polluting Bikini Bottom's ocean floor. If an environmental cleanup crew showed up to assess the damage from Plankton's debris field, they would hit him with a year for each incident. Across 303 total episodes, he has probably littered the town 30 times, so a total of 30 years in jail for just littering. By this time, you know that he can do anything just to get his hands on the secret formula. I mean, Plankton's meticulous sabotage in Evil Spatula demonstrates his connivance.
If Plankton did anything for the formula, why didn't he ever sell his soul to the Flying Dutchman?
Driving nature.
Sabotage!
Breaking into the Krusty Krab with a fax machine, and then he damaged SpongeBob's spatula by cutting off a piece of it. He then tricked SpongeBob by giving him a replacement spatula, which Plankton uses as a conduit for deception. By speaking to SpongeBob through a voice-modifying device, he manipulated him into trusting the spatula. Breaking equipment central to the restaurant's operation could lead to 5 years per act. Assuming he's committed similar sabotage 20 times, that's 100 years. And don't you think he committed fraud with SpongeBob in this episode? Well, using deception to gain the formula could add 5 years per instance. If Plankton has tried similar fraudulent schemes 25 times, that's another 125 years. And Mr. Krabs can't go a week without Plankton barging in with some harebrained scheme or tossing out a creative insult. SpongeBob, he is not safe either, constantly being dragged into Plankton's ridiculous plots, whether he likes it or not. Just look at this example.
That's it! You better cough up that secret formula or else! Plankton! Crabs! Plankton! Crabs!
SpongeBob!
If this isn't harassment, I don't know what is. And I'm pretty sure that harassment laws would take one look at Plankton's antics and hand him at least 2 years. At this point, he'd probably
Wait, what?
look at Plankton's antics
What is this? That's not Plankton.
and hand him at least 2 years. At this point, he'd probably argue that persistence is part of his brand, but the judge wouldn't buy it. Now, he usually targets Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward. Considering that he probably harassed each of them 100 times, that comes down to 800 years in prison for harassment. But littering and harassment are only the tip of the iceberg. What about the times when he tried to kidnap his own wife, Karen? Or what about his attempts at stealing the Krabby Patty? Plankton was always a master manipulator, but in the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, he took things to a new low. It wasn't enough for him to steal a small piece of a Krabby Patty and attempt to analyze the formula. It always came back to SpongeBob. The Sponge's seemingly innocent presence had been the bane of Plankton's criminal schemes for years. Finally, he realized that to succeed, he had to remove SpongeBob from the equation altogether. And we come to Gary the Snail, SpongeBob's beloved pet and closest companion. Plankton kidnapped Gary in a heartless act and sold him to King Poseidon, knowing full well that SpongeBob would leave Bikini Bottom to rescue him.
Too perfect. Get rid of Gary, get rid of SpongeBob. Oh yeah.
With SpongeBob out of the way, Plankton could manipulate Mr. Krabs into handing over the Krabby Patty formula. For a moment, his plan worked. Krabs, overcome with grief, simply gave up the formula, but obviously, he couldn't read the recipe details. Now, this crime involves 2 major offenses: kidnapping Gary and selling him to King Poseidon. Assuming this is the only time Plankton kidnapped a living being for monetary gain, this singular instance would carry a significant sentence. In the US, kidnapping can result in up to 20 years in prison, and the trafficking or sale of a living being adds another 10 years. And if you remember watching the Plankton's Army episode from the 3rd season, you know that he briefly kidnapped Karen, his own wife, by shutting her down and taking her CPU against her will.
For years, it has been my goal to acquire the secret formula for... But aha! Okay, that's enough!
Wait, I thought it just unplugged her. What?
In real-world terms, kidnapping a sentient being is a grave offense, especially when combined with physical or emotional harm. And don't say that Karen is an AI robot. She literally gave birth to Plankton's child, and we have seen her getting emotional countless times. If that doesn't make you a sentient being, I don't know what does. Anyway, coming back to our topic, Plankton's multiple attempts, let's assume at least 3 more cases, would land him a hefty 60 years in prison. In total, we are looking at 110 years in prison. His persistence in this regard makes it clear that he's not learning any lessons from failure. And if you remember watching the shopping list episode, you know that Plankton adopts the role of a shadowy spy, tailing SpongeBob and Sandy as they gather ingredients for a Krabby Patty. Plankton's plan is simple: steal their ingredients, reverse engineer the recipe, and create his own Krabby Patties. While the ingredients turned out to be incorrect, his actions clearly qualify as stalking and theft. And we all know that this is far from Plankton's first foray into surveillance. Assuming Plankton resorts to this tactic at least 50 times throughout the show, which is obviously a reasonable estimate given his obsession, the sentence multiplies quickly. For each instance of theft, Plankton could face up to 3 years in prison. Adding 1 year for each instance of stalking or illegal surveillance, the total adds up. The total sentence will come to 200 years. That's 2 centuries. And this is not the only time he has committed theft. For example, in the episode Spot Returns, Plankton's amoeba pet Spot unexpectedly gives birth to dozens of puppies. He sees their potential, not as loyal companions, but as tools for crime. This tiny one-eyed villain manipulated SpongeBob into helping him find new owners for these puppies. Turns out the puppies stole valuables from Bikini Bottom residents and returned to Plankton. Plankton then came up with the idea to use these puppies to steal the secret formula. I'm not going to tell you again that he failed miserably. But this crime involves animal exploitation and organized theft, both serious offenses. Exploiting animals for illegal purposes carries hefty penalties, and organizing a coordinated theft operation makes matters worse. While this is one of the few times Plankton uses animals for theft, we can reasonably assume he commits organized theft in other ways throughout the series, averaging 10 major offenses. If you were to commit these 2 crimes in the real world, you would be looking at around 15 years in jail, which means Plankton's prison sentence for this crime would be 150 years. And let's not forget his unlicensed science experiments. Plankton's laboratory is a hotbed of chaos. We have got food mutating rays, he tried mentally programming SpongeBob, and obviously, he has tried creating dangerous laser guns. In the real world, experiments like these would trigger alarms across multiple regulatory agencies. A food mutating ray? That's a clear violation of food safety laws, the kind of offense that could land someone in prison for around 3 years. And in any jurisdiction, operating hazardous equipment without oversight would be considered a severe threat to public safety. If someone in the US were to carry out similar unlicensed experiments, they'd be looking at a prison sentence ranging from 5 to 15 years, depending on the scale of the risk. And
Jeez. Plankton is screwed so far. But the worst is yet to come, I bet.
with Plankton's history, the risks are always catastrophic. And for performing scientific experiments on SpongeBob, he could land in jail for up to 10 years. When you start adding these offenses together, the numbers climb quickly. If we assume that he committed all of these 3 violations at least 10 times during the entire show, we are looking at 280 years in prison. And that's just for the experiments we know about. Who knows what other monstrosities he's been cooking up in that lab? Well, in order to steal the Krabby Patty, he first has to break into the Krusty Krab. I mean, we have seen him infiltrate the Krusty Krab or other establishments countless times to steal the Krabby Patty formula. For example, in Imitation Crabs Season 2, he disguises himself as a robotic replica of Mr. Krabs and infiltrates the Krusty Krab. While breaking and entering might seem mild compared to other crimes, the repeated nature of these acts, combined with his advanced technology, would likely amplify his sentence. In the real world, breaking and entering can land you in jail for up to 7 years. And before you say in the comments that I'm exaggerating, I would like to remind you that your prison sentence increases if you commit the same crime regularly. Let's assume he tries to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula around 100 times. He would be spending 700 years in jail. I know these crimes do not sound as flashy as you might have thought, but we still haven't reached the max level. I mean, Plankton loves endangering the lives of animals. His willingness to exploit sea creatures, such as harnessing jellyfish to power his inventions, crosses ethical and legal boundaries. These creatures are living beings, and using them as tools for personal gain would land him in hot water with animal rights organizations. A penalty of 15 years for these ethical violations seems appropriate. And I'm sure at least 500 jellyfish have been subjected to his cruelty, which means another 750 years spent behind bars. And I also like to think that he simply does not pay his taxes. I know it sounds like a mundane crime compared to his others, but it's no less significant in the eyes of the law. Given the Chum Bucket's questionable revenue streams and his habit of avoiding accountability, it's highly likely that Plankton has skipped out on paying his taxes.
Jesus. There's so much going on. I can't keep track.
If proven, tax evasion could result in an additional 10 years behind bars, along with hefty fines that would drain his financial resources further. But let's talk about the crimes that carry lifetime prison sentences. Then we have another episode called Salsa Imbecilicus. Using Patrick's DNA, he creates a chemical sauce, Salsa Imbecilicus, designed to make Mr. Krabs as unintelligent as Patrick. The sauce's effects are catastrophic and it spreads across Bikini Bottom. Eventually, the entire population of Bikini Bottom, except Sandy and Karen, is reduced to imbeciles. The deliberate creation and distribution of a harmful chemical substance would be treated as bioterrorism in the real world. This is arguably one of Plankton's most egregious crimes, as it impacts an entire community. Assuming this is Plankton's only mass chemical attack, we will add another 25 years in prison for chemical endangerment. However, this was not the only time he endangered all Bikini Bottom residents. For example, attempted mass murder. In the fun episode from the first season, Plankton builds a device that could potentially destroy Bikini Bottom.
Certainly the safe couldn't survive nuclear detonation. Come to Papa!
Wait. The safe exploded, but the formula's okay? What?
While it is thwarted by SpongeBob's antics, the intent behind the device's creation is clear: mass destruction. Even an unsuccessful attempt at mass murder would lead to 25 years in jail. If we are being generous and assume that he has attempted mass murder only 10 times during the entire show, we would still end up spending 250 years in jail. And in the episode Free Samples, Plankton deliberately poisons Bikini Bottom citizens by handing out fake Krabby Patties. His motive? Framing Mr. Krabs. Deliberately distributing harmful food could lead to 15 years per offense. Assuming 10 instances throughout his schemes, that's 150 years. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Plankton uses one of his most audacious schemes yet. I'm talking about using mind control devices to enslave the entire population of Bikini Bottom.
Okay, that's super illegal. So, that just bought Plankton like maybe 25 years, I think.
What? All hail Plankton!
His aim? Total domination of the fast food industry, cementing the chum bucket as the reigning force in undersea dining. This act of mass manipulation is deeply disturbing. Enslaving sentient beings strips them of their free will, a fundamental violation of human, or in this case, aquatic rights. In the real world, such an act would be viewed as a global domination attempt on a smaller scale. Courts would have no choice but to issue the harshest possible punishment: life in prison without parole. So, after adding it all up, Plankton's grand total comes to 3,800 years in prison.
Jeez. Holy. Yeah, Plankton would never get out of jail.
Yep, I did the math, and you can see the breakdown on your screen right now. And this estimate is still conservative, considering we didn't count potential fines or assume there were additional crimes hidden in his long and dubious career. If reincarnation exists, Plankton might have to live dozens of lifetimes to finish his sentence. Alternatively, Bikini Bottom's justice system could opt for a creative solution, like forcing him to serve as a public servant, cleaning up his own litter, or dismantling his weaponized robots. And that wraps up our deep dive into Sheldon J. Plankton's lengthy and criminally diverse rap sheet. But the story doesn't end here. What about his financial situation? How does someone with such consistent failures fund all these outlandish schemes? Click the on-screen video to
Alright. Thanks for watching. See you.